185milessouth.com.
Smash that Patreon button.
185 Miles South, a hardcore punk rock podcast. What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we are gluttons for punishment because we didn't get smacked around enough for our top 100 list of the 80s. We're coming back for the 90s, which is even more offensive to people. So, fuck you in advance. Helping out, you know him, you love him. It is Daniel Sant. And Dan, not fuck you. Fuck the people that are upset with us.
Oh, yeah. Fuck them long and hard.
Send in your list, people. Put your money where your mouth is. What's up?
And you know what? Some real true heroes did provide a list of their top 100, and some, really got involved in the convo. So that's awesome. There were For sure. And everyone can go check there's a few lists that were submitted by the people. You can check them on the link on the website. They're up now, or they will be by the time this airs. It would have been up sooner, but your boy almost went to heaven. Okay, also helping out, it is Ben Merlis, a.k.a. Ben Edge, a.k.a. Bedge. What's up, Ben?
What's going on?
And rounding us out, dude, he left New York. It's Anthony Papalardo. What's up, Pops?
I'm chilling. I'm here to troll this listicle. That's what they're for. Just kidding. I'm going to take it seriously, but
no,
gotta have fun.
It's like we're going to talk about it because anytime you put together something like this, it is easy to pick apart. And the thing is, like, the master list is a combination of the four of our lists, right? So everyone's going to be a little upset with some things, myself included. I'm upset about a lot of pieces of this list. So let's jump right into it. First off, you got to go see the list. Go to 185milessouth.com. At the top of the page, click that top 100 link and just follow, and you'll be able to see the master list of the 90s. Dan, why don't you give us the top 10? And Ben, why don't you give us 11 through 20?
All right. This is the master list where all four lists have been amalgamated into one. So, 185.
Real quick. Let me just, I'll add the rules. So basically, like, if you voted, so we each made a list of a top 100, right? A number one pick gets 100 points. A number 100 pick gets 1 point, right? So you guys get it. A number three whatever the fuck. Anyway, and then also on top of that, we are rewarding consensus. So basically, for every consensus vote, the pick gets an extra 5 points, right? So if two people voted on something, it gets an extra 5. If three people voted on something, it gets an extra 10 points. And if 4 people voted on something, it gets an extra 15 points. So that's how this boiled out. Dan, let's go to you, number 1 through 10.
All right. So number 1, coming in with a bullet, Inside Out, No Spiritual Surrender, 7-inch. Number 2, Chain of Strength, What Holds Us Apart, 7-inch. Number 3, Burn, self-titled, 7-inch. The top 3 all going to Rev. And all being 1990. That's interesting. Okay, number 4, Integrity, Those Who Fear Tomorrow. Number 5, Unbroken, Life, Love, Regret. Number 6, Youth of Today, Disengage, 7-inch. Number 7, Turning Point, No Escape, Split, 7-inch. Number 8, Bad Religion, Against the Grain. Number 9, Undertow, At Both Ends. And number 10, Lifetime, Hello Bastards.
All right, Ben, do 11 through 20.
Yep. Number 11, Jawbreaker, 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. Number 12, Ignite, Call on My Brothers. Number 13, Madball, Set It Off. Number 14, Floor Punch, Division 1 Champs, 7-inch. Number 15, Rancid, Let's Go LP. Number 16, Sick of It All, Scratch the Surface. Number 17, Earth Crisis, Firestorm 7-inch. Number 18, Outspoken, A Light in the Dark LP. Number 19, Fugazi, In on the Kill Taker LP. And number 20, Reason to Believe, When Reason Sleeps, Demons Dance LP, 1990.
Right on. Okay, let's dig into this a little bit. There are a handful of records where all four of us at least voted for the band, right? So, for instance, in the 90s, Mouthpiece puts out 2 7-inches and an LP. And actually, they're an interesting one because one of us voted for the first 7-inch, 2 voted for the last 7-inch, and one of us voted for the LP. So stuff is all spread out. In that instance, what happens is if one of the records has more people voting for it, that record takes the precedence. So that record wins. And in the case where, let's say that everyone votes, there's 4 votes for a record or there's 2 votes for a record, whatever person ranked the record higher, that record gets chosen. So I wanted to look at these records that the 4 of us all voted for because that's pretty cool. Or the one where we voted for the band of the 90s, right? So Inside Out, the 7-inch, the highest rank on it was number 3, but it got a number 1 vote because all 4 of us voted for it, and 3 people actually ranked it number 3. The lowest vote it got was number 15. So the Chain, same thing. The highest vote for the Chain 7-inch was number 5, and the lowest was number 14. For the Burn, the highest was number 2, the lowest was 29. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And what's interesting, also number 4, the Integrity, the highest vote was a number 4 vote, and the lowest was 49. And then Integrity, number 4, it was split. 2 of us voted for Those Who Fear Tomorrow LP. 2 of us voted for The Humanities of Devil 10-inch. But the votes for the Those Who Fear Tomorrow 12-inch were higher. So that one won. And another interesting thing here in this top 10 is number 1 through 4, none of them got a number 1 vote. The first time that a number 1 vote appears is on number 5, which is the Unbroken LP. Its highest vote was number 1. The lowest vote for it was number 37, or for Unbroken, because 3 people voted for Life, Love, Regret, and 1 person voted for Fall on Proverb. Anything else here jump out to you, Dan, in this first section where we voted for all 4 of these together?
In the all 4 section, whoever voted Unbroken at number 37 is a madhead.
Or just has good taste. I don't know.
Here we go.
Nah.
I think it is bonkers because, what we try and do is obviously we put forward the things we like the best. Number 1. Like that's the primary result of making your 100. But then there's also, historical relevance and importance. So that goes into it. I just, my brain is not wired to know that Unbroken could sit so far down at 37. But, Black Flag was 99 or 100 on my 80s list. So I can understand people thinking I'm a mad head too.
I want to qualify that real quickly. I think that band is super important. They're just not a band that hit with me, but I felt like they had to be at least top 50, and I bumped them up as high. Like I really labored over this, but yeah. I don't know. I really thought like you want to leave this thing behind that people could look at it and say that's a great representation. I also knew people would rank it higher, so here we are. They landed at 5. So I don't know. I really tried to be. Some things are super important to me and tried to like detach myself from that, and some things are just undeniable. So I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of like Tetrising with this list. It got really difficult. But
for sure, I had to walk away from it at some point, or I would keep fiddling with it. But the thing is, spoiler alert: Unbroken was ranked my number 1. Life, Love, Regret. I think it just casts a massive shadow over the 90s and beyond. what's interesting about the integrity choice is I had it really high, but I had Humanity is the Devil on mine, but it must have been a combination of whoever else chose Humanity had it ranked much lower, and then the other two came in between, right?
It's a tie, so the highest rank wins, right? So it's 2 and 2, and then I had Integrity, Those Who Fear Tomorrow at number 6.
And I had them at 7. You
had them at 7?
The Devil at 7, so
that's crazy.
It just missed out, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the way. That one could have broken either way.
Yeah.
I think it's a good. I think it's a good time to kind of talk that, like, unlike the 80s, this is a list that we experienced a little more, like whether it was in real time or, stuff we slightly missed or whatever. And it's sometimes it's hard to separate the impact or things that you saw quite a bit or things that were like accessible. Like, this was a world where you might have never even seen Unbroken, you know what I mean? Or they played once and then other things had like an impact that was maybe more felt in your scene. So I think that, like, no matter how impartial you want to be, that's going to play in. And I think that's a good thing, though, Oh,
yeah. I mean, I think I'd say about 80% of this list for all, 100% of your list pretty much, Pops, but 80% of everyone's else's list was definitely stuff that was real time being loved, all through the 90s. So,
well, I've been honest on this pod and said I didn't get into hardcore till like 96. I got into punk in like 93, 94, but like that's a child listening to punk, right? So I missed half the 90s. So mine is like straight up split half and half.
But the minute you started getting into hardcore in like 96, you were grabbing all these records and recordings of things that were extremely important, right?
For sure. And now, talking about our individual lists, everyone, that's on the website too. So the main list will be there. You can click through and see our individual lists, so you can see how all that stuff stacks up, because this may or may not get heated later. We will see. We will see. Okay, the other thing I wanted to note on this, like all 4 people voted for it, is actually pretty fucked up, right? Because Turning Point got a number 1 vote, and Pops voted it number 1. But he voted the LP number 1, and the other 3 of us did the Turning Point No Escape split 7-inch. And so the 3 outranked the 1. And so Turning Point technically has a number 1 vote here, and someone has it. I think I have, like, that split is 75. So that's a giant spread, and that one ends up at number 7. So the consensus helps a lot, plus some high votes help a lot, Also, just to say, number 1 through number 12, all of us voted on it. So that's that's a pretty sick thing, right? That number 1 to 12 is full consensus with the 4 of us. Also, number 14 is consensus. That's the Floor Punch pick. 3 of us voted for the 7-inch, 1 for the demo. Number 21, the Redemption 87 LP, the self-titled LP, that is on here. The highest rank is 41. The lowest is 76, but that consensus bumped it up. It's number 21 on the list. Also, Mouthpiece, they end up at number 24 with the Face Tomorrow 7-inch. The highest rank for them was 10. The lowest was 100. So giant spread again. And like I said before, 1 person voted for the LP, 1 person for the first 7-inch, 2 people for the second 7-inch. And then the last thing that the last band that all 4 of us voted for, this is pretty interesting, is Shelter. They ended up at number 68. The highest vote they got was number 70. The lowest vote they got was 87. And all 4 of us picked different albums. So that's pretty rad that there's a band that all 4 of us picked a different best album for the 90s. And maybe we should talk about that a bit. Dan, do you remember what you picked? Let's go to Pops. Do you remember what you picked?
Yeah, I picked the No Compromise 7-inch, and I think that goes back to sort of the real-time thing. The No Compromise 7-inch was the first one I heard. It was the one that, like, Free Will is just such a banger of a song. And I think Shelter is a band that the recorded output, it's kind of like Youth of Today in a sense, where like the recordings are all over the place. There's different eras of the band. The lineup kept changing, and I don't know. I think it's easy to have an affinity for which version you saw, but for them being, it's kind of like a misrepresentation of how low they were, because they were probably one of the most influential bands of the 90s. But I think if we're kind of looking at it as like where all these things stand, I think it's probably kind of works out, but I do want to note that they had a run where they were just an incredibly magnetic band, and it's super fun to see. And also I think part of it is like, if you miss Youth of Today, you get to see some formation of people from Youth of Today with, obviously Ray being like the anchor that gives you that energy. And also they were just kind of a fascinating band. I think getting a room together of a bunch of teenagers with like a aggressive Hare Krishna band is a very weird, strange, surreal, almost psychedelic thing. And, for as low as it was, I think it's still, they're still incredibly powerful and interesting. It's just, I guess the ska era might taint that a little bit. And, that's unfortunate, but that's how this goes,
Yeah, I chose Attaining the Supreme. I love that record. And I do agree that I think that Shelter ended up kind of low ranked. And it's one where it's all our fault, right? Because like the range they end up in 70 to 87, and they actually end up getting ranked 2 spots above the highest rank at 68. They kind of landed where we all thought they should land, but like thinking about it now, it's like, ooh, that is a little low. Ben, which one did you vote for and why?
I voted for the Quest for Certainty 12-inch just because I think that's their best song, Quest for Certainty. And I ranked that one at 70. And I got to make a little correction. You were talking about Floor Punch and how some of us voted for the demo and some of us voted for the 7-inch. I actually voted for the Floor Punch LP. So there were 3 different, that was split 3 different ways amongst all 4 of us.
Oh, okay. I counted that wrong. Good catch.
I know, but I noticed that before you even, pulled out the stats, that there's less consensus among records that we have of bands we have consensus of than there was in the 80s. God, that was a mouthful. But you know what I mean? Like Circle Jerks, Group Sex. Who's going to argue that? Like, or if you are, you're stating the unpopular opinion. In the 90s, it's like, I don't even know if there is an unpopular opinion with a lot of these bands. It's just like, it's just so all over the place.
Right. Where the 80s, that's actually a really good point. So in the 80s, like a lot of bands had like an undeniable classic record, where the best bands in the 90s a lot of times put out 2 really notable records where you wouldn't like get your opinion shit on if you liked one or the other.
Yeah, I think Integrity is a great example of that. It's, I picked Those Who Fear Tomorrow because that's the first one I heard and that blew my mind. But the other records, like, I could make a case, and I think I even argued, like the other, the second and third, whatever. I don't have the discography in front of me, but like those are banger records too. And I don't think it sometimes it's just time and place, right? Like you have an affinity for what you heard first and sort of like the folklore.
Yeah, 100%. I think you could pick any of those 3 First Integrity LPs, if we're counting Humanities and LP as well. And like, that's good. And same, like, Dan called out Pops for ranking Unbroken 37, but he didn't call out Ben for choosing Fall on Proverb 7-inch over the Fall / on Proverb 7-inch.
It's and / Fall on Proverb.
Oh, and my bad.
Yeah.
See, now I'm going to sound like a fool. I'm gonna edit that. Hold on.
It's just a typo.
It's just a brain typo, dude. It's called the COVID long fog or whatever.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to say about the interesting point about Shelter. That is a when the legacy goes bad over time, that's the effect it has. Like you said, like the power of that band in 90 to 95, right, is one thing, but what goes on from like 96 to infinity is pretty, leaving planet Earth and all of that stuff. Like it very
it's called
much
Beyond
harms.
Planet Earth. Daniel, put some respect on the LP's name.
Okay, sorry to the cow on the cover. Sorry to Daisy. But it just shows the legacy, like, eroding has hurt where they are placed in our minds,
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say real quick, Fugazi, I think, is a good analog, right? Like, you have the weight of, I mean, two people coming with like the weight of some incredible work, right? And I think you could, maybe with the exception of Red Medicine, you could play someone, or whatever. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but like, you can play people a Fugazi record who never saw Fugazi, and they're going to get it. They're going to get why that band was important. I think Shelter is a little more like, if you were in that room, right? If you saw them, like, it's Ray Cappo's new band and he's a Hare Krishna, that has a lot more like that anticipation, that build up, whatever, and then they come and deliver. It's cool. I think the recorded output just doesn't translate that as much. Whereas like I said, like a band like Fugazi, I think that's why they still resonate, because the live, most people who like that band at this point never saw them, and it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that the Shelter thing is really interesting because, like Dan said, in hindsight, like kind of the reputation makes it a little more low ranked now. But also, like, thinking back on it and looking at like our list, that all four of us chose different records, like that should be very flattering about that band, right? That like,
yeah,
they have like a catalog that has enough girth there that like we can each grab onto something. So it's kind of neat. Okay. Let's talk about some other stuff. I wanted to mention that the highest ranked record that only had 3 people vote for it. Let's just go through the top 20 that got 3 out of 4. Madball Set It Off, number 13. Rancid, this is number 15, 16. Okay, this rounding out the 20, starting with number. So yes, Floor Punch got 4. Rancid, Let's Go at number 15, it got 3. Sick of It All, Scratch the Surface got 3. Earthcry's Firestorm got 3. Outspoken, A Light in the Dark got 3. Fugazi In on the Killtaker got 3. Guess who didn't vote for him? What's up, fools? All right. And number 20, Reason to Believe, the LP got 3. Who didn't vote for Reason to Believe?
Probably me.
Oh, what a fool. I mean, looking at the list.
Still made the top 20.
It still made the top 20, which is insane. And let's talk about that now. Like, let's look at this top 20 and talk about if we think that anything is overrated or underrated. Daniel, what do you think?
Oh, I've got one that's underrated. That it's infuriatingly underrated to me. Earth Crisis Firestorm at 17. That should be a top 5 record for the 90s, without a doubt. But that's just my opinion. That one is crazy. To me, it was a little bit weird for me to see on your list that the Floor Punch 7-inch was only number 18.
My list?
Yeah, I found that kind of weird, but that is still 14 on the main list. I think I had it at number 6 overall.
Yeah, I put a little bit more emphasis on LPs because I think that they're harder to do. And like when you're a hardcore band that pulls off a great LP, that is like such a gnarly accomplishment. A lot of hardcore bands have pulled off good 7-inches, right? So it's like if you have the great LP, I guess I weight that a little more. And that's why Floor Punch ended up at number 18 on my list. And they are, for 7-inches, the only 7-inches I ranked higher were Burn, Chain of Strength, Inside Out. That's it. So 1, 2, and 3 on the main list, right?
Yeah.
So they're the number 4 7-inch for me of the 90s, which is heavy, and that's crazy. I rank LPs a little bit higher just because they're so hard to do and pull off.
That's an interesting way of thinking about things, but I just think about the pure impact of certain releases. It is how I did it, and for me, the pure impact of the Firestorm 7-inch is just monumental. And to some people, you know, like we're talking about the legacy that Shelter, it's harmed over the legacy. To some people, what Earth Crisis kind of birthed, and when I say some people, I mean Ben, that is a record that came out that he can respect that record, but what it birthed, he hates, you know. So there are subconscious factors coming in as well. I think it's pretty interesting that Let's Go beats out and Out Come the Wolves for Rancid, because they're both incredible, and it's just it's almost like a coin flip. But upon listening to them both a lot in the formation of this list, I went and Out Come the Wolves. I just think it is just slightly more dialed in.
Yeah, I'll pull it up here. So Rancid had 3 votes. It got Let's Go at 12, which was, well, God, it got ranked really high. Let's Go got ranked 12. Out Come the Wolves got ranked 11, and Let's Go got ranked 20. So,
yeah,
that's pretty solid. And you're right. I mean, I would say Let's Go and Out Come the Wolves are a toss-up too. I just land on Let's Go. I think it's like, I don't know. And Out Come the Wolves is like very mid-tempo, like the whole record. I love it, obviously, but like Let's Go just has more, I don't know,
yeah, it has
a little bit more variety, I guess.
Yeah, and it's got definitely a bit more, as the foggy brain on the pod says, YOLO. It's got a lot of YOLO.
YOLO. Yeah. Do you feel that, like, okay, so do you guys feel good about Fugazi coming in at 19?
No,
like,
I think it should be higher too.
Okay, that's one that you think should be higher. And for me, like, I think it's criminal that Set It Off is not top 10. You know, that ends up being 13.
I agree that it should probably be top 10 as a tentpole for the 90s. But I mean, look at the top 10 we have. It's pretty great. It's and this is no disrespect to them at all, because I love them so much. But Undertow being number 9 is interesting.
Yes, if we're talking about things that ended up higher than maybe they should have been, that would be the one, right? And I love them as well, and so it's like, I'm not going to complain about them getting top 10 because it's a great record. I mean, their whole catalog is great. They're an important band, and they don't embarrass themselves. You know what I mean? They're sick for an old school band. But they end up being a little high, maybe, and I'll tell you why. Let's see here. So Undertow, all 4 of us voted for them. And, yeah, 3-1 on Apotheon's LP versus a Stalemate 7-inch. And they got ranked 19, 21, 21, and 47. So the fact that like 3 people ranked them right there between 19 and 21, and someone else ranked them top 50, plus the 4 consensus points, that gets them there in the top 10. So that's that. And I think it's fair, because I do think it's important. The consensus thing is important. Like, think about it. Like, we all kind of have common likes when it comes to hardcore. But if you think about the 4 of us, like, they are pretty diverse. You know, I think that, like, between the 4 of us, we cover a pretty big tent, you know, or a pretty big tent covers all our shit, right? And so, like, the fact that 4 of us agree on anything is pretty impressive and should be rewarded. Do you think that's fair, Pops?
I think it's fair. It's making me think of this, that I think, well, I'll just speak anecdotally. For me, when big moments happened in the 90s, it was kind of like a roadmap. Like, it was a very rudderless time, you know, like there wasn't much of a consensus. I'd say like early to mid 90s, right? Like, things were just firing off. It was almost regional. Like, you know, San Diego had a certain thing, DC had a certain thing, Boston had a certain, like, it was actually, Boston didn't really have much, right? New York had a certain thing. And it's hard to separate, because it's hardcore, it's hard to separate the music on a piece of vinyl from the ripple effect. So for me personally, and this is no slight to the people in Earth Crisis, but when Earth Crisis came out, I didn't like that direction, and it wasn't even musical. It was kind of like the ethos, and even being like a straight edge vegan person at the time, I was like, ugh, I don't really like that, you know, kind of in the same way that I didn't like religion in hardcore with Shelter, or just the way things sort of go, because people are very people want to grab on to the next thing, right? And like maybe to some of our benefits on the pod, right? Like, you know, old school hardcore coming back might have been a boon for some people, and that's cool too. And other people might have been like, that's lame. So it's kind of hard to say this is important, but then also because it's hardcore and it's so personal, and then say like, yeah, but I didn't like what that did. So it's a very weird thing. Like, I think Madball's like properly rated. Like, I don't think a lot of stuff in the wake of Madball was better or more inspired than Madball. And kind of in the way that I think you could say that for Earth Crisis, and then like Undertow. I don't really think a lot of bands took what Undertow did, and I don't think that changes their legacy. I think they were super important to have this band of young people who were kind of like torchbearers doing something. And I think like just because Undertow didn't spawn a movement of Undertows, that sullies what they did either. So I don't know. It's just a very, it's objective and subjective at the same time. And that's kind of what makes it fun to talk about.
Yeah, agreed. Is there anything that you think is overrated on the top 20? Like that
top
jumps
20?
out at you? Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe Reason to Believe is just because my eyes went right to 20, and I love that band, but I don't know. I could bump Super Touch up over there, or like Rorschach, I think is kind of low. Then you could also make a case like Hatebreed probably sold the most records on this entire list. Like, should they be higher because of that metric? I don't really know. It's just super hard to, you know, like to have Reason, like, and this again, like, it's so hard because we know a lot of these people, or we have an affinity for people in these bands or what they stood for. Are you going to say historically Hatebreed's less important than Reason to Believe? I don't think anyone would make that argument, right? So it gets a little tricky.
Right. And that's the hard thing about the list. And it's also hard curating like the people voting on the list, because that's insane that the Hatebreed record isn't top 10 on the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, in my personal opinion, I can respect people that want to like lower rank it, but that's a wild one. And only two of us have it on the list, and they're ranked high on both the lists. So it ends up kind of high because one person has it number 5, which I think is me. And then one person has it number 18, which I think is Daniel. Daniel, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
And then
so that one's criminally underrated, in my opinion.
I think the one right underneath it's criminally underrated for legacy and power and actually great music as well is the Bikini Kill. Bikini Kill comes in at number 27.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, just looking at this list, like, I'm pretty happy with the top 50. 30 is pretty great. The top I don't know, all the way on the top 50. I can start having some like disagreements. Like, I'm okay letting go of like the Fugazi thing, right? It's not my thing, but I can understand the importance of it. Like, I'm not mad at it being top 20. But yeah, I mean, I think the top 30 is pretty great. Top 25, top 30. So anyway, Ben, any comments on this section of where the four of us all voted on it?
So this would be the top 20. Let's see, the ones that all four of us voted on.
If you scroll down underneath the list, then there's 101 through 110, and then there's Zack notes, please don't edit. And then right there, there's a list of, it's like 1 through 12 plus 14, 21, 24, and 68.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. There's like certain things where I'm thinking like, okay, when we did the 80s list, it was just me, Zach, and Dan, and then Pops was on the episode, but he didn't actually make a list. So this one is all four of us, and I'm thinking, what would this list have been like if Pops, didn't make his list? Like if his votes got taken, you would have stuff like probably Madball or Hatebreed be even higher. So I think he kind of evened it out a little bit. Like, obviously, the more people you have doing these lists, the more the smoother it'll be, the less wild, some of the choices, the rankings will be. And then I think, like, okay, what if you had everyone who liked punk in the 90s, make the list and have a supercomputer average out all the scores? Well, fucking Green Day would be number one. And here's something crazy. Green Day isn't even on the list. It's not.
Yeah, I was thinking about that like Green Day and Offspring both aren't on the list, which is kind of wonky when you think about it. Like, because it is really hard to do this list, right? Pops did a good job of discussing it, that you're like really balancing out your personal opinions with like bands and records that have merit, right? And sometimes, like, you can come down too hard one way or the other. And I think that we all were homers a little bit in the fact that none of us put the Green Day LP or the Offspring LP on our lists. Like, that's pretty crazy that none of the four of us even had any of those ranked in the top 100.
I don't think it's that crazy, though, because we went back and we put them head-to-head against each other, and they don't stand a chance against any of these on all 100 of each of our lists, really. When you go record versus record, they don't make it.
I would take both those LPs. I would take either of them over things that ended up on our top 100. You wouldn't, Dan?
No.
Take it to next time someone's talking, like, start looking at 100 and go up the list. Okay. And think if you would take Green Day or if you would take Dookie or Smash over any of those records. I would 100%, dude. You know what I mean? Like, all right. Over Tiebreak? Come on, dude. Come on. You are. Okay. I wanted to note the highest record. Let's see. Okay, let's move on to the next section. The highest ranked with 2 votes. We talked both these already. The Hatebreed Satisfaction is the Death of Desire LP came in at number 26 with 2 votes. The Bikini Kill Pussy Whipped LP came in at number 27 with 2 votes. So both those records were ranked really high by the 2 people that voted for them. Also, I wanted to note the lowest record that made the list that 3 of us voted for is Amenity, the This Is Our Struggle 7-inch. 3 of us voted for it. The highest vote was number 66. The lowest was 91. And so it ended up on the list at number 89. And then Shelter, all 4 people voted for it, all 4 different albums. And that ended up at, I don't know, I don't have it right here. But it ended up, there it is, at number 68. So that's all that weird stuff. Also wanted to note that number 100, there was actually a tie for number 100. So the Rancor 7-inch ended up as our Master 100, but it tied in points the Swing Kids Spanacorzo record. They were both tied for 100, but the Rancor had 2 votes. That Swing Kids split only had 1 vote. So I gave it to Rancor. Okay, Ben, let's jump to you to talk about bands by year and region.
Okay, I did this for our 80s episode as well, where I broke out all the regions that the bands that made. I'm only doing this for the master list, not our individual lists. And then we can compare the results to what the 80s were like and see, try to see if we can explain the differences. So for the winner of the 90s was the East Coast. Well, here's the regions I did: East Coast, West Coast, Midwest / Texas, Canada, UK, Continental Europe, Japan, Australia. So those are the regions. East Coast won with 43 records. West Coast with 35. Very similar to the 80s list, almost the same. Midwest / Texas got 13 records in the 90s list, where it only got 7 in the 80s. So you have a big uptick in Midwest, and I'm assuming that has to do with like Integrity, Ringworm type bands. And then so it almost
Dillinger 4.
Dillinger 4, that's true. So it almost the middle of the country almost doubled from 7 to 13 between 80s and 90s. Canada 0, just like the 80s list. Now this is the biggest difference here. The 80s list, there were 17 UK records. The 90s list, there are 2. Those 2 are Mush by... Well, there's Hardskin, and there's also
Leatherface Mush.
Leatherface Mush. Right. Okay. So enormous fall off from the 80s to the 90s with UK. And then finishing off the list, Continental Europe, we have 5 for the 90s. We only had 1 for the 80s, which was Raw Power. I think that this is kind of where our prejudices show. I think there was a lot of that second wave youth crew stuff coming out of Continental Europe in the 90s that some of us rode for, that kind of made the bottom tier of the list. Whereas not a lot of Continental European hardcore fans for the 80s stuff, which is actually sort of much more critically lauded in the punk community. You know, you'll probably find more people who are fans of Indigesti or whatever, or fucking BGK than sportswear. But this is who we are. You know, 3 out of the 4 of us were straight edge kids in the 90s. Japan 2 in the 90s list.
Hey, Dan, and 3 out of 4 of us are straight edge kids now. What's up? 2 weeks today, dude.
Oh, Gia. Welcome to the posse. Japan, there were 2 picks for the 90s, and Australia 0. In our 80s list, we had 0 and 0. So I'd say the biggest difference is the UK thing. And I mean, what do you guys think? Like, what is it with the UK and 90s punk and hardcore that wasn't cutting the mustard for the most part?
I was going to ask that same question to Dan.
Yeah, Dan, why don't you carry the weight of the nation on your shoulders and explain this to us?
It was a lot tougher. It got splintered. Like, it seems like lots of those 80s punk bands then became like pro and then went the butt rock route, you know, and then it just seemed to go extremely DIY in the 90s, which then in turn took a lot longer to groundswell to great records. There are some great things in there. They just don't beat anything on these lists, really. You know, Bordy's probably out there screaming like, "What are you talking about? Knuckle Dust demo," or something, you know. But it just didn't come alive till, you know, late 90s.
Hardcore has so much regional bias, especially like in the 90s and going back, you know, and the pre-internet days, right? Although, like, you know, the 80s have so many big like consensus tentpole records, and maybe the 90s do as well, but yeah, the 90s are very regional, and I do think that like the 4 of us that's real, right? We have the bias, especially like on the 80s list, that we only had 1 continental Europe. Like, that is a giant knock on our list. In fact, it's probably the biggest knock, right? And Staffen from Sweden, who's normally one of the nicest guys ever, kind of smacked me around a little bit there about that. So respect to him, because he's right? Like, that's just a blind spot for us. But hardcore is wild, and you got to think about so much of this stuff, kind of like Pop's talking about before, is when you got into it, how you felt about it. Sometimes, like, when you're younger, and in the like high-speed internet streaming days, like, a lot of stuff you couldn't find. And so it's like, oh, I just never had that, or didn't have the means to have it, or whatever the fuck. So it's like shit just misses you, right? Absolutely. And you can't really be blamed for that. So I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
Well, yeah, I feel you can't pose like, oh, I can't retroactively just say this record's amazing when you haven't really spent any time with it. You know, we've got to be real to what our record collections and what our taste level is. Even if it is wrong. And that's the best thing about it, is that it does cause, you know, Staffen to be like, yo, what the fuck? And then creates this conversation, which is great. And then maybe we get turned on to, you know, some records that we, maybe if we did this again in 10 years, we definitely in there as a tentpole. Do you know what?
100%, but also staff and submit your list, fool. Can't come at us if you're not coming at us with 100 because, you know what I mean? It's very easy to look at a top 100 list and be like, hey, what about? But until you put your list out there and we can, hey, what about you? Then what's up? You know? What about that? You know? Also, just want to say Leatherface comes in at number 33. The Mush LP is a serious classic, and everyone should check it out.
I'm not going to lie. I thought about like some UK omissions, and I was like, I actually had to think. I'm like, where was Fabric from? I was like, okay, they could maybe count. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that one. Or like Bob Tilton. I like that band, but I don't know. I feel like there wasn't like a micro scene or something. Like there were these little moments where parts of wherever, you know, like there was a cool thing happening in Canada that didn't make the list with like Union of Uranus and Shotmaker. I don't know. It's like also like this stuff not being readily available, not being on streaming, that kind of plays into it. And that's an unfortunate bias, but it kind of is what it is.
Well, Canada not having propaganda, how to clean everything, that was quite a large record of the 90s.
It was.
Absolutely.
Crossed over like that was the great uniter between like the Fat Wreck Kids and like the Crust Punks. You know, it's like everyone liked propaganda.
Yeah.
You know, so that is a bummer that it's not on here because you're right, Dan. That one is like that's low ranked. I didn't have it on my list, so blame me. Also,
Canada.
Hey, you saw we dropped out of the top 200 in Canada, dude. So Canada knows where it can go. Either start listening or we don't give a fuck.
Let everyone look at the top 30 and see how many records or how many bands in the top 30 you didn't choose. Because I think that's pretty interesting. Because I only haven't chosen 2 of the bands that are in the top 30.
Yeah, I'm at 4.
Yeah.
Great question, Dan. Great radio.
Yeah, I know. The dead air while Ben and Pops are counting.
I mean, I didn't choose 30. I know that. And you know, I couldn't put my own bands on the list. It's like the wildest thing of all time.
Oh,
does that feel weird? Like you did end up at number 30 for a 7-inch that you wrote. Like, how does that feel?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's super cool. You know, like who doesn't like when you care about something so much to have it acknowledged, like how could you say like I don't care? Like, of course, like that's awesome. You know, like to have 2 records on this list with people that I really respect and I chop it up with, like that's fucking insane to me.
That's right.
Or not a record. One of them's a cassette.
Right. We did the demo. So do you feel like the first In My Eyes LP is slighted by us going the demo route?
No, I think that LP sucks. I can't wait to maybe if I get on the Rev Pod, I can talk about how bad I just don't like. I think that demo was like exactly what that band was, and then the LP was so sterile and weird, and I think only to the fault of taking way too long to record it and just people not listening to what a hardcore LP should be. You know, I think that LP is like a great representation of that band.
I think sterile is the perfect descriptor of that. Following the demo, it really is just made in a lab compared to how the demo is full of heart.
But if you want to call it sterile, then like it maybe has more influence. Because how about all that early 2000s stuff that is just so slick and it's like, oh, this is hardcore and it's fast, but how is it so sterile? And it's like if your mom walked into your room, she'd be like, oh, Johnny's listening to good, positive, good sounding music. It's like so not punk, you know?
I'll lay it out right now. So that LP was recorded to a click track, and I think I was so against that because I feel like all the stuff that I think is awesome didn't need to be done to a click. And I totally understand why people do that, whether it's like easier to edit or they're trying to flex their resume or just learn how to do something. But I don't think not to go on a tangent, but I will say really quickly, when you're recording music to the hardcore fast beat, which is kind of technically not a correct beat, like it's kind of off by a half a measure or whatever. Like it's a very strange, like the true fast beat is a very strange beat. Why are you trying to put it in time and syncopate it? Just let it breathe. Like if you started a metronome on any song on start today, it would be faster or slower by the end, and no one gives a fuck.
No,
like
you lose the animal of hardcore when you put it to a click. It is the complete sterilization of it. And on top of it, some of it is just because the drummers wanted to show that they had chops, and that's just boring.
Dan, you're getting a little echoey now. I don't know why.
Oh.
Okay.
I just want to say my band had a long conversation about this because we're going to record soon about whether or not we should record to a click track. And I'm like, no. And then I was like telling the drummer, Javi, I'm like, but you just have to play really well. You just have to be really good. Like, let's not play to a click track, but just be really good. Like, it's a lot to put on a drummer's shoulders, but that's what it is. You know what I mean?
All right, then. Let's see here. What else we want to get into?
Yes.
Oh, I wanted to talk. Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so we did the 80s, and I predicted accurately that there would be a bump in the early 80s, and then there'd be kind of a dip in the number of picks from the mid 80s, and then a big bump again in the late 80s, which is exactly what happened. 82, 83 was a big bump. 88, 89 was a big bump with a kind of a dip in the middle. So for the 90s, my prediction would be that it would start very strong because, you have a lot of 80s spillover records. Youth of Today and Chain of Strength have records coming out in 1990. Those are bands from the 80s. So I thought the decade's going to start really strong. Then there's going to be a giant drop off, and then it would come back in the late 90s. And that's not actually what happened. Okay, well, one of those things happened. The decade started very strong. So here goes. 1990, there were 17 picks. 91, 11 picks. 92, 7 picks. 93, 10 picks. 94, 14 picks. 95, 9 picks. 96, 10 picks. 97, 9 picks. 98, 9 picks. And then 1999, 4 picks. So what happens is 1990 surpasses even my expectations as being, and it is the number one, the year with the most picks with 17. So you have this really high point, and then you have a little bit of a dip in 92, and then it kind of just evens out, and you have 9 or 10 picks for the rest of the decade with a little bit of a bump in 94, and then the biggest loser of the decade is 1999. I would not have predicted that, and I don't know what accounts for it. All I can think of is like maybe we say the 80s you have these big these records where everyone agrees are classics. I think maybe the first half of the 90s, it's so far in the past that you have that, but you don't have that for the second half of the 90s. You don't have as many records where everyone agrees, even us four agree, like, oh, that's a classic. So that might account for the drop off at the very end of the decade.
Well, hardcore got so much more splintered. Like, what is considered hardcore and punk got so much more splintered in the 90s and spread so much further, like bordering on indie rock in some, bordering on like extreme heavy metal in others. And so it's so much further afield. So, I mean, what's interesting about this is my experience in the 90s is like, I'm riding for Youth Crew, but I'm also riding for vegan metal. I'm also riding for straight up like Promise Ring stuff or Ethel Meserve and stuff like that. Like, you're just so much further afield in choices. So to try and think that there are classic 100% agreed on across the genre of tentpole records is going to be a much more varied discussion than it would be in 1980 to 1989.
But here's what's interesting.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. Could we make a list of 100 hardcore adjacent things of the 90s? It would be pretty solid. I think so, right?
Sure.
Well, some of them aren't on here, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I left off a ton of things that were like Jawbox into another, because I was like, well, there's things that were more hardcore. Shudder to Think. I love Shudder to Think. I feel like I'm not a Texas is a Reason person, but like that's not on here, right? Promise Ring. I feel like you could do like bands that are hardcore adjacent. You'd have another 100 list easily.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
And Zach's head would explode.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, different podcast people. Come on.
This is interesting though. So the year with the second most picks is 94. What do all of us have in common? We're into that youth crew shit. 94 is like there's fucking nothing in that lane, but we got 14
Life,
picks
love,
out of
regret.
it. That's okay. That's one record.
Yeah, but that's one record, Dan. It's one record.
So that's
You know what I
interesting.
mean? So it is.
Hey, historically, let's say this: the youth crew revival lasted longer than the youth crew. That's pretty wild.
Yep.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I think that like there's so many. We talk about the '90s splintering, so a lot of stuff starts and kind of, in the impetus of these new splinters, like those are the records that become classics, and that's kind of like the years that happen, right? Like, I don't know, 94 is a strange one that doesn't really back me up, but like 94 is wild. It's got set it off. It's got scratch the surface, right?
Life, Love, Regret, 108, Songs of Separation,
The Rancid album.
Bouncing Souls, Good, Bad, and Argyle.
Yeah, got a bunch. Plus, like, if you look lower the list, like, we did get Epitaph represented a little bit, right? So
that might be it, though. That might be it, because 10 Foot Pole is 94. So if you add kind of the more, like, NYHC keeping it real shit plus the Epitaph stuff, that probably explains the 94 bump.
Yeah, although Pennywise, we took the first record. That's like 91.
Yeah.
Let's Go is 94.
Oh, Let's Go is 94. There you go. So
Hey,
okay.
can we address real quick the metal elephant in the room?
Absolutely. What would you like to speak on?
I didn't do a find in this list, but I believe Converge is not on here, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And so
That's a massively influential band that we all didn't pick.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not a connoisseur of this style, but I feel like Unbroken being on here, Converge not, maybe that's a little, I don't know. I'm throwing the topic out there. That's it.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a perfect example because I threw out like an idea and then I wasn't able to like back it up with anything. And that's kind of the idea I was talking about with like when these threads start, like some of that earlier stuff is considered classic, and then like when it goes for a few years, like maybe the people that aren't true fans of the genre like fall off, which I think is the reason why 99 falls off, right? Like almost every genre of hardcore is getting like maybe a little tired, and it's time for something new. That's why like something like an American Nightmare can come in and just like bang it out and like become the biggest band in hardcore, even though they're so abrasive and wild. It's just like because everything was stale. I don't know, but like that would be why Life, Love, Regret, right, is on my list. Is really high, and I could never get into Converge. It's too zany and metally for me. I can objectively know that they're a great band, right? But it's just like it's too smart for me.
They really should be on the list, though. They're at like 105 on my list. And another band that didn't make it that really should be on the list, if we're talking 90s hardcore, is Snapcase.
Oh, yeah. That's a glaring omission.
Wow.
Yes, Snapcase, Dead Guy, right?
Yep. And Damnation AD.
The first Indecision LP didn't make the top 100.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff. Like we aren't like metal hardcore connoisseurs, really. Like, which is insane because like I feel like the list like represents a fair amount of that pretty well, but it leans very early 90s on the metal stuff, right? Like an Integrity record is 91, right? Unbroken's 94, So
we're definitely going to get eviscerated for Converge not being represented in the top 100, and rightfully so to an extent.
Everyone's favorite Converge record came out in the 2000s, right? I mean, I don't like that band at all, but it seems
the Empty Sky.
Okay,
right. It's a breakout record. Like I saw him at Showcase
Game
on
changer.
that, and like it was huge. You know?
Yeah, you're right. Jane Doe like had another massive imprint, but Petition in the Empty Sky when it came out had a massive imprint as well.
Right. But yeah, but even then, like I wouldn't know if it was that one or When Forever Comes Crashing, like which one people would consider more classic, right? The 96 or the 98. So whatever one starts that one that goes,
Yeah,
right?
that's on Petitioning.
Okay. Yeah. So that's like, yeah, that one maybe should have gotten voted, but hey, it's really hard to detach myself. Like, again, it's like, if I were to look at this because I don't know really anything about this band, I wouldn't know what LP to choose. And maybe if it was like in the 80s, right, where there is those like consensus albums, like let's say that you don't know like the Circle Jerks, right? But you're like, dude, the Circle Jerks, they got to be on my 80s list because it's the Circle Jerks. Like, you just know, like, put in Group Sex, right? Like, I mean, some people might do Wild in the Streets, I guess, but no, you're doing Group Sex, right? But like this Converge, you're looking at, it's like, oh shit, they got like 3 LPs in the 90s. Like, I don't know what to pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's like, which type of converger are you? You know, like I'm sure there's some people who are like, what about Halo in a Haystack? That's an LP, right? Like that's one that was like, that was regionally a big record, you know, and then that person gets out of hardcore or whatever, but that's their tentpole record. And then, you know, like you said, someone else like Jane Doe is the tattoo record. Like they have that on their elbow or something. It's again, it's, I think that's what's really, unlike other genres, like hardcore is very tethered to entry points and time. You know, like you could be the biggest jazz fan ever and you never saw one person on anyone in your record collection. They're all dead, but you know, you're encyclopedic about jazz. And that's like, there's not many people who love hardcore who are like that.
Yeah, that's fair. It's more personal, but that's also like the reason why we like hardcore, right? I mean, like in the beginning, when we all got into hardcore, some of the appeal of it was the person on stage. There's not that much of a barrier between that person and the person in the crowd, right? Like, absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of the appeal of punk and hardcore. Although, like, by the time I get into punk, all my favorite bands are behind barriers, and they never like come out from behind them anymore, right? Which is like one of the reasons why I love hardcore so much more than I like, you know, punk. Like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, who can get inspired from going to like the Punkin' Drublic Festival, right? It's like, it's just like a giant punk show. All the bands are behind barriers. No one's really socializing, or if they do, like a couple of people come out, right? But like, there's no mingling. Like, we all fell in love with like hardcore in small rooms. And so I don't know if you could ever, we can try to be as objective as we want, but you can never take the full on personal experience out of it, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, one thing I want to talk about is I believe the highest record on the list that made the top 100 that only one person voted for was one of mine. I ranked the Turbo Negro Apocalypse Dudes LP number 8, and so it made the list at 79. And there's a handful of these, and a fair amount of them are mine, so I'm kind of like an outlier, dude. I think I was the only person that voted for Powerhouse No Regrets. That ended up at number 83 on the list because I had it so high. I had it at number 17. So it made it in. Dan, do you see anything on the list, like of your solo ones that made it?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few that made it. I had the Gehenna demo, or did you vote that one too?
I didn't. So that one made it number 81.
Yeah, Gehenna demo, Kill Holiday, Meant to Let You Down, and I had only the Strong 7-inch that's in there, as well as Swinging Out of the Streets of San Francisco, which
cool. So
is funny because they beat, you know, the Amenity 7-inch, which 3 of us voted for. It's just because I probably had some of those ranked really high.
Yeah, you ranked it so high.
I voted for Kill Holiday.
I'm glad that
you did.
Only the Strong made it. It's like one of the greatest records in the 90s. You know, it's just like I didn't, again, just like the 80s, I told you guys, like, I'm not voting on comps. So that's all. But like, that would have been in my top 25, probably, if I would have like done comps. But like, God, that's such a dangerous hole that I didn't want to go down. Ben, what were you going to say?
Oh, I actually did vote for Kill Holiday, but I voted for a different record. It was, I don't know why I said vote. I just made a list like everyone else. I did the Monitor Dependency EP from Kill
That's
Holiday.
okay.
It's
It got
okay
the
to
points,
say
though.
vote over and over again because people do need to vote because look at the fucking state we're in.
Yeah, well, Ben, your point is taken because it did get the points, right? So you did vote for that one.
Right. Okay.
Pops, did any of your single picks end up making the top 100?
Good question.
You'd have to look between 79 and 100.
Pitchfork
If you
did.
picked, so Pitchfork is a Pops.
Lincoln,
I picked
probably.
Pitchfork. I had Pitchfork as well. I had Lincoln as
Ben
well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. So those made it. All right.
Yeah, I
Ben,
think
any of
that's
yours?
Did anyone else vote for Atari or Fast Break or Rancor?
I voted for Fast Break for sure.
Okay, so I guess Atari and Rancor maybe.
I don't think so. What was that? Oh shit!
I'm offside.
What is going on?
Penalty on the field. Excessive trolling. Edgelord Merlis, 25-point penalty on his solo picks.
Oh man, Ben's solo picks got a 25-point penalty. Voice guy Tony is brutal for excessive trolling. Ben,
Which ones?
so well, I don't know because I guess I could look on the master list. Let's look at the penalty list. The highest one was Into Another Ignorance. That one, it ended up at 102 on the list. So it just missed the 100 because it got the 25-point penalty.
What? That's insane.
Why? What?
Why? Well, I can understand Into Another is debatable, right? It's a Jace as fuck.
I didn't knock anything out this time. There was no this is not punk stuff that got called. Just any of Ben's solo picks got a 25-point penalty for his excessive trolling.
Any of them?
Any of them. But if any of his picks had a second person vouching for him, then it did not get the penalty. So if Ben voted for something and a second person also voted for it, it's like 100% full points. But due to his excessive trolling, if it was a solo pick, it got a 25-point penalty.
Ben, defend yourself.
So this is like my punishment for the 80s list, or is this for my punishment for this list?
The 90s list, because come on, dude. Look at like where you rank tiebreak. You know? All that stuff that you rank tiebreak over, that's like offensive. I know you're trolling. You don't have Sick of It All on your list for the 90s? Come on.
Wait, I ranked a band high, and you're saying I'm trolling because I ranked a band like I like a band, so that's trolling? Isn't that the reverse of trolling?
I think no.
It's like championing.
You're trolling because you're saying
underdog.
it's better than all the other stuff. You're saying it's better than all the other stuff.
Okay, Ben.
Which is like impossible.
To be fair, I was just about to defend you, but you have tiebreak 2 points ahead of Ignite, Call on My Brothers.
Exactly. Perfect example, dude.
Yeah,
there's no way that tiebreak record is. And you loved it. It meant so much to you in the 90s. You talk about it, dude.
Yeah,
and
like Montserrat Caballo, if you want an opera singer.
Well, I like tiebreak better now, so.
Dude, the tiebreak record is like if Rancor was shittier. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't deserve to be on the top 100, you know? So, like, it's a fun record, but it's like, yeah, third-rate 90s Youth Gear Hardcore is, like, fun. But, like, dude, there's so many good records in the 90s. Like, there's no way this should be number 60 above Ignite. Like, but come on,
above
dude.
Floor Punch.
Above Veil.
Above the In My Eyes demo.
But this
above Rain on the Parade that you just talked about how much you loved it. Above the In My Eyes demo. Above Floor Punch. Above the Battery LP. Like, dude.
Shaky drumming.
Above the Ringworm LP.
Integrity Light. No. The thing is, you two are trolling me, so you should get the penalty, 25-point penalty, because you're trolling me right now. right?
What are you talking about? We're trolling you. No.
You're trolling me. You're like, you like tiebreak. They suck.
I can't take your list seriously because objectively that is like a shitty hardcore record.
I like it.
So like all your other like picks are cool if someone like co-signed on it, dude. That's my whole point. So all you needed was one other person and all that stuff is on there. There's plenty of like stuff on here that got 2 votes, you know?
I'm not part of this trolling. I'm just an innocent bystander commenting on what I see. And I will say, you having Tiebreak at 60 and then Ignite at 62, and then you've got a Veil below it, Judge below it, Rain on the Parade, In My Eyes.
Dan,
Flow,
just jump right to it. Just jump right to it. Ben,
below.
please explain to Pops how the Tiebreak 7-inch is better than the In My Eyes demo. And I'll go on mute right now.
I wouldn't say it's better. I say I listened to it more in 2022 than the In My Eyes demo. I listened to the In My Eyes second LP more than I listened to the Tiebreak fucking 7-inch in 2022 This is my list.
You're saying that it should be ranked higher. You're saying
I thought you were on
higher.
mute.
You're saying it should be ranked higher on the 185 Mile South top 100 records of the 90s. Tiebreak higher than In My Eyes demo.
The whole point is we average each other out, but of course you had to say I'm trolling by trolling me and then getting rid of my picks. What other picks did you get rid of?
Let's see what might have made it.
Is this like all the Spider-Mans pointing at each other saying who's trolling who?
Other things that got bumped that are close, like Shudder to Think, got bumped. It's 111, so I don't know if it would have made it if I was gonna take out the.
It would have.
Okay, and then maybe the Rain 12-inch EP. That got ranked at 116.
Ashes.
The Ashes LP got 118. And let's see, Force Down Stifle got 121.
So
that's it. Jawbox 126. Then we're Captain Jazz 133. One Sided War 139. Come on. Kid Dynamite, good record. That's 144. I don't think it would have made it even with the 25. So those are the ones that got like edge.
Shit, I didn't know that was 99.
Yeah, of all the ones you named, the one I'm kind of surprised someone else didn't vote on is Kid Dynamite. But so it goes.
Right. So there's other ones like. Yep. So it's not that big of a bummer. And besides,
if you want to think about, I mean, in the consensus court, if it's considered not trolling, but like not quite hardcore punk, Pops avoided Shudder to Think and a couple of these other things, which he surely would have taken if he was taking the same idea of this hardcore adjacent stuff getting on the list.
Totally. Yeah. Right?
You know.
Pops, are you there?
Yeah. Plus
that's 100% true. Cause I don't know. I mean, I was going through the list and I had like a hard stop for most things. I was like, is there something more hardcore? Like, for example, 98 Aspirin Feast. How do you call the cops on the cops? Like, I had to put that on there. That title rules. That record's awesome. And I love Shudder to Think, but if I'm going, I'm going to tell people what 100 great hardcore records are, I'm not putting Shudder to Think on there.
Or punk.
Hardcore adjacent, they might be like 5, you know?
What if you included the punk banner, though, Pops? Still, hardcore or punk? Should it be there or not?
Would Shudder to Think be included, or
right over the?
I think they're neither
than it is punk, in my opinion.
Well, here, what did Pop say? Because you guys talk at the same time, Dan. Hold off.
No, I think it falls in the same. It falls into the Into Another category of people from hardcore punk playing something outside of it, right? That like, if Into Another or Shudder to Think had their druthers, they would have been playing with, I don't know, who would Shudder to Think play with, like Echo and the Bunnymen or something, right? Like they wouldn't be opening for Swizz. Well, it's just, I don't know.
Well, what I will tell you, Pops, the first time I ever saw Shudder to Think play was they were opening for Sonic Youth. And
right.
at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, and it was a big, college rock, alt rock show, not a punk show.
Well, okay, so we can agree now that the penalty is proper. And but let's ask one more person, because when I almost went to heaven, I was able to figure out how to make contact with some people beyond. So let me see if I can get Tim Johannan over here. Hey Tim, what do you think, dude, about the penalty?
I, the ghost of Tim Johannan. I will allow it.
All right, it's settled. Tim Johannan backed me up, so what's up?
Yeah,
The king of what's punk and what's not.
anyway. MRR was kind of boring.
See,
anyway.
Ben's still going, dude. MRR, that's probably number 120 on punk fanzine list.
I like a lot more fanzines than that too, though.
Of course, but dude, the MRR classifieds, that gets it top 20 just alone. Come on, the classifieds and the ads,
and the right to reply. And the right to reply.
Jesus. Fuck MRR, dude. Fuck anyone that worked there in the year 2001. Suck my dick. Okay. Anything else that jumps out to you guys on this list? Anything else you want to chat it up on? Dan?
Yeah, I feel when you get down into the 60 to the end of the list, it's really interesting. There's lots of things that undeniably earned their spots on here. Rain on the Parade body bag at 75, Life's Halt, We Sold Our Souls at 74. AF One Voice only being at 62. Is that low rank or what?
Yeah, that's way low ranked. That's way low ranked. There's a lot of that in here, but hey, at least it made the list, right? I mean, dude, that's the thing. Ben, I think Ben said it best for the 80s, right? Ben, how many, you thought that there was 250 crucial LPs for the 1980s, right?
Yeah,
it's making
200.
the 100 is
200.
Yeah, so 200. So yeah, so if you're making you're saying those are good, right? Those are good or great records. So it's you're cutting in half the amount of great records that came out. And the 90s is so much more open that it's very hard. It's why I didn't bump anything this time. There wasn't this isn't punk. Ben was just trolling, so he got booted. But if he had someone backing him up, they did not get sucked down, right? Yeah, AF at 62 is probably pretty low. Yeah, but you can look at a lot of stuff and be it's high or low. I think the list overall is pretty good, and it's pretty sick that everything from number 1 to number 78 all had a cosigner. Right, so these are all records that at least 2 of us signed off on, or top 100 records. I think that's ill.
Well, if we want to talk about something extremely 90s, the highest ranked CD only release is Death Threat Last Days at number 46.
Shit, and that should have been number 1, dude. That's one of the greatest records of the 90s.
I know that, it's ill, and Ben is probably why is a CD only at 46? There should be a CD in the top 10. But the Bane Holding This Moment comp of the 2 7-inches is also a CD only at 48.
3 7-inches.
Oh, 3 7-inches, yeah, you're right. And then Powerhouse No Regrets at 83, CD only. And then everything else is available on vinyl. So there's only, which is so funny because I feel when you think back to the 90s, so much of your interaction with this stuff was with CDs. But I feel I bought the CD and the vinyl for lots of these things. Vinyl to put away, CD to play in the car type thing. Or CD to put in the CD man then, which had the tape adapter to go in the car stereo.
Ugh.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to mention there's 3 records that had 2 votes that didn't make the top 100. Buried Alive, The Death of Your Perfect World came in at 113. It got rated 54 and 94. And then At 128, Chorus of Disapproval, Truth Gives Wings to Strength, I believe is what the LP is called. It got ranked at 74 and 83 by two people. It didn't make it. Got in at 128. And then the Built to Last, another CD only, Dan.
Yeah.
So Built to Last, the CD, it came in at, I don't know.
The band.
Let's see. Yeah, the CD Built to Last is a band. It is the self-titled CD. And it came in at, I don't know.
I think tied for 128.
It tied for 128. Okay, there you go. Cool. I'll tell you where it got voted, though. Let's see. Built to Last got ranked at 93 and 98. So, by the two people, and then it missed the list. CDEP 1997. Okay, let's jump into some things that I think are egregious. Other than Ben's solo picks, I think Criminally Rated Low, Hatebreed LP at number 26 is insane. That Hatebreed LP isn't in the top 25. My next gripe, Poison Idea, Feel the Darkness, Criminal, that's not in the top 25. And then these are all rated really low.
Zack?
What?
You just said Hatebreed coming in at 26. It's so egregious that it's not in the top 25.
Well, it should be in the top 10. It should be in the top 10, and it's like, okay, it's not in the top 10. Maybe if it was in the top 20, it's like, okay, that would be offensive if it was like number 18 or some shit. I'd be like, why is this not in the top 10? But at least it's in the top 20. But then if it was in the top 25, if it was number 24, I'd be like, what the fuck? Why is this Hatebreed record
Zack,
not in the top 20? What?
the Poison Idea, you're mad that it's not that's not in top 10. You didn't put it in the top 10. I'm looking at your list. You have it at number 11. Thank you.
I haven't said that it should have been top 10 yet, dude. I was talking about the Hatebreed.
Oh, I thought you
Should have
were
been
talking about Poison Idea.
Nah, dude. Poison Idea should have been top 20 for sure. 29, a little low. But I guess that's not that egregious. You're right. Okay. I think the Good Riddance LP is spectacular. The first one, Forgotten Country, number 88. I guess I should just be glad that's on the list because I know that's not like a consensus pick with all of us. But for the 90s, I think that the Cold as Life LP only getting 93. Again, at least it's on the list, but fuck. That's probably top 50. Cause for Alarm Warzone Split. Those 4 Warzone songs, that makes it top 20. Come on, people. Death Side, the Bet on the Possibility should have been ranked higher. I'm glad that the Bastard LP got ranked higher, but that Death Side LP coming in at 98 is a bummer. And then 3 things that are on the list that are very offensive to me. I think that Kill Your Idols should have made the list for the 90s for sure. I think I was the only person that voted on this is just the beginning 10-inch. Having Kill Your Idols off, maybe that's as egregious as not having Converge on or something. Like they were one of like the, I don't know, hard-hitting DIY touring bands that like crossed a couple genres. Very important to me personally. So them, they came in at 109. The Bulldoze 7-inch coming in at 115. Again, offensive that doesn't make the top 100. Basically started a whole fucking genre. And
ain't nothing but a rank down.
Dude, nothing but a low rank from the 185. That blows. Hopefully we don't get beat down. Okay, and then the District 9 7-inch should definitely be on for the 90s. Like, that's a top 100 record for sure. And there's so much to that record. I don't know. It's like, whatever, dude. That offends me. But what can you do? Dan, anything super offensive that stands out to you on the list or omitted from the list?
Well, I think that was a massive point about Converge. I think that is a very valid point. So, as you're all sharpening your knives, listening to this pod, and about to rage on us about certain things, and especially Colin of Arabia is going to come looking for us because he was already mad about what was it 96 we did the other day, and Converge not being on it. It all in the comments. I would have to say there are some things on here that I can understand why they're on here, but there's a few things that just don't speak to me at all. But that's the name of the game.
Call out a couple, Dan.
Like for example, the Blood for Blood Spit My Last Breath, I don't think needs to be necessarily on the 100 when I see a lot of the stuff that didn't make it. Like the Filth Blatz Shit Split not being on here is offensive to me. I think that's a massive 90s record, especially West Coast punk hardcore. I've never been a big Peg Boy person, and they're ranked pretty high. But I know a lot of people that are. I'm really psyched that, around the halfway of the list, we've got Main Strike and Sportswear representing, and then I think Confront Payday 7-inch is incredibly low ranked at 49. And then, like I say, the things that I am very surprised that aren't on this list would be things like Snapcase, Converge, Damnation AD, Endeavor, Threadbare. These are all things that just shout Another Victim. They're all things that shout like 90s hardcore to me, but they didn't quite make the list. They were just a little bit low. They didn't quite make my list too. They were like, guilty of being in my 101 through 110. And then, I this is such a fun exercise, and, we are going to have to put up with some people telling us we're on crack or whatever, but hey, present your list, show us where you're at. I'm actually, through this process, I am pretty happy with the top 100, really. Because it shows 4 different people's tastes all mingling, one of them being unfortunately penalized, but it shows all 4 people's tastes and people who really ride for 90s hardcore, and this is what came out being representative of all 4 of us. I do think the Hatebreed is criminally for what it birthed, just the same way that I feel like the Earth Crisis is low ranked too. But for the most part, I think it's really good. I think having things on here like Heroin and Drive Like Jehu and Lincoln show a little bit more of what the 90s really were like than just having tentpole hardcore or like catchy hardcore or Youth Crew. I think having those things where, I'm surprised Still Life and a couple other things didn't make it, but having that kind of ripple in hardcore going a little further afield and tapping into emotion and tapping into arts and tapping into a different kind of songwriting being represented on the list is great, because if we didn't have any of that, it wouldn't be a proper 90s list. So those are my thoughts.
Cool. Well, the Blood for Blood LP smashes on like the last 10 things he talked about. Pops, any takeaways, things that you think are too high on the list or got left off?
I think there's a lack of power violence representation, which is pretty important, but I can live with that. I think the omissions of the Iceburn Collective, Campfire, and Fight Records artist Good Clean Fun is a little more problematic, but other than that, I feel good about it. I feel like this is a good swath of what was happening.
Yeah. Let's see the power violence stuff. Infest made it this time, like higher than last time, which is good, I believe.
But there's no Man is a Bastard, right? There's no Crossed Out.
The Locust.
Yeah, Plutocracy. I don't know. I think that shit was just...
Crossed Out made number 58.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so it got represented with 2 things, right?
I think Man is a Bastard is the one because they were like a patch band, right? Like you would see people like with that patch, and I think that logo is super iconic, and they're just a super interesting band. I understand if they don't hold up musically to some people, but I think they were definitely like a very progressive, interesting band that probably should be represented, but whatever. I don't think there's anything too egregious,
Right. And you're you voted for Neanderthal at number 46, and it didn't make it. So that would
that
be the
thing
highest
fucking
thing.
crushes. That record crushes.
Right. Yeah. It's another little bit of a blind spot, So again, the 90s are just so vast. It's easy to like miss stuff, right? And it's like, for instance, I think that Blood for Blood LP is amazing. It's in my top 50, and Daniel doesn't think it should be in the top 100. And Daniel and me, you think that like we overlap on like maybe 70% of our hardcore stuff, so that's pretty wild.
Well, it's also
just such a
interesting that
diverse.
I did put Blood for Blood on my list, but I chose Living in Exile.
Right. So you like when they change it to like the rock and roll stuff, and they totally lose me by then. So, I mean, that first record is like one of my favorites. Like, that's like my favorite style of hardcore is like straightforward, a little heavier, big moshes, still have fast parts. Like it's pretty near perfect to me. Yeah. Ben, how about you?
I think overall it's a great list. Despite how I was, wronged with my penalty picks. But I'm looking at this list and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty rad, and it's pretty representative of the time. And of course, I'm not a Madball fan or Hatebreed fan, but of course those two are going to make the list. So it's not like there's no huge surprises here. Like, how the fuck did that get on this list? It's like, yeah, this is a good list. There was one thing that Pops brought up in a group text that I wanted to touch on really quickly. He said, which individual played on the most records on this list? And so I think we figured out that it must have been Walter Schreifels, because he played bass on the Youth of Today record. He sang and played guitar on the Quicksand record. He sang and I think played guitar on the Moondog one. And then he produced the Civ record, and he played on something like either bass or guitar on some of the songs. So that's 4 records. And then I went back and did the same thing for the 80s, which didn't take much time. It's obviously going to be Ian MacKaye, Teen Idles, Minor Threat, and Brace Fugazi. So 4 for him as well. So that's kind of interesting, like which individual sort of dominates the decade.
That is interesting.
So what, Bratton comes in second, right? With like 3 appearances?
Inside Out, Chain of Strength, which are, number 1 and 2, which is pretty impressive.
And Statue, right?
And Statue.
And I think that's...
And then Alpayne kind of, I don't know, he didn't play on the Inside Out record, maybe?
That is correct, because Chris Bratton did.
Yep. So he's got Chain and Statues. That's pretty impressive, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Great list. I'm glad Bad Religion is up there. They're a big one for the 90s for me, and Against the Grain is just an incredible record.
That's a really funny one, because at 8, it's almost underrated. Like you take it for granted. Like, they're such a fantastic band. You're like, oh, it's not their best record, but it's a powerhouse record.
Yeah.
It might be their best record. Like, I don't know. I'm a Suffer guy, but Against the Grain is a hard number 2 for me.
Oh wait, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Not to slander the Turning Point No Escape split, which is awesome, but why the lack of love for the LP? Is it the funk bass?
I love the funk bass.
No, I just think that later Turning Point is so exceptional, and like we've talked a lot, like on the pod, like using the Nervous Breakdown 7-inch mostly as the example, but does like 10 ranked song, like it's like a perfect 10. Like it outranks like 3 number 9s. You know what I mean? And I don't know if the Turning Point LP has like a high enough high as like that Turning Point side of that split.
The self-titled track and Face Up, I think, can hold themselves up to the thing. But then the added point of getting No Escape on there as well, So and also these Turning Point songs birthed another genre. You're talking about other things that birth genres. Those 2 songs really birthed a lane of hardcore that was excessively done after.
And a cool band took their name from it, right? So that's really awesome.
Yeah, it's but that is hard because like on almost everything else, I lean LP, but that late turning point is just so spectacular. You know,
It's a cool argument because, you know, if you think like bands from the 80s that went into the 90s and did something really relevant, like to me it was like, oh, straight edge hardcore isn't done. It's a little more progressive and like we can drop a banger LP and keep it going. And it obviously didn't go in that direction, but then they're like, yeah, we're progressing. Then we do this thing. And like Dan said, that it spawns genres. It's pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive body of work.
Yeah.
Dude, if there are these 2 Turning Point songs plus Broken was like the other side, is that a top 5 7-inch?
Yes, 100%, no question. I
Throw the rap song on from the New Age comp too. That thing rips.
Well, here's
there you go. That's the 7-inch. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, my rationale was very similar to Zach's. I had Turning Point No Escape Split as my number 2 because of the Turning Point side. Like if it was a one-sided 7-inch, it would be my number 2. And I like No Escape, but the reason it's number 2 is because of Turning Point. And I think Behind This Wall is probably my favorite song ever recorded. Number 1, I had Hello Bastards, because it's a 10 and it's an LP. So another sort of Zack thing of, my God, they were able to pull off a whole album of perfection. It's for a band like that. It's yep.
I have one more point about the master list, that for such a band to almost define this decade within hardcore shows across the world, Sick of It All being at 16 is low, I feel, even though it is in the top 20. And then another point, Just Look Around versus Scratch the Surface. I think that will make a great head-to-head when we do another MASH pod, if we look at that, because I think that's a really interesting putting those 2 records up against each other in the 90s. But I think Sick of It All being the band that when you think of the hardcore band of the 90s that was just dominating, maybe it's because lots of people regard their 1980s output as being their very best thing. But if you were around in the 90s, Sick of It All were bringing it with arguably the best live show, and were just uniters. They played with all kinds of different bands, and for them to be at 16, I think is low ranked.
Fair. But 16 is also pretty high ranked. It's top 20, dude. Like, what a negative approach get for the 80s. You know what I mean? Like, it was low in the top 20. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Also, Tie Break was ranked higher than Sick of It All on one of our lists.
Yeah, that's fucked up. I don't think Ben ranked Sick of It All. That was part of the penalty, dude. It's like Tie Break makes number 60 and Sick of It All doesn't make the list. Come on, dude. Yeah. Sorry, Ben. Okay, final thoughts. Ben, you feel good about the list outside of now that your trolling has been fixed, you still feel good about the list?
Yeah, because what did we established that Into Another would have made the list had that penalty not happened, and then there was only a couple things that actually would have had the points to make the list anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's not
like
that
stuff
big
that
of a
would be
deal.
in your top like 20. So
right.
Okay,
so Into Another and Shudder to Think would have been the 2 that made it.
Right, you ranked those really high. So okay, but final thoughts, Ben.
I think like the top, it starts getting wonky towards the bottom. You got stuff like Path of Resistance, which I like, but I've already told my feelings about that on another podcast. Like Amenity, like stuff that like there's not as much of an argument to make that these are classics. But goddamn, the first 3/4 of this list are pretty fucking incredible. Like this was a very good decade, And I look back at it. I spent the 90s wishing it were the 80s. That's how I spent the 90s. And now I'm looking back at the 90s and I'm like thinking, nope, that was a really great decade. So it was cool to do an exercise like this just to have it laid out and be like, okay, like I did miss a lot by not being old enough to go to shows in the 70s or 80s, but I did see a lot that was cool after all. Like my life has been validated.
Yeah, you saying that you ride for the first 3 quarters, that really lines up with the list, I think, because again, it isn't until number 79 that there is a pick that makes a list that a single person voted for, right? So number 1 through number 77 or 78 is consensus. So, Dan, final thoughts on this?
I like our list. I think it's going to spur some interesting conversation. I think my personal list, I would be like Earth Crisis Cheeks, man, and I would get all 10 of my top 10 tattooed on my cheeks. I'm not saying which cheeks, but my top 10, oh my God, I'm looking at it right now. It should be the top 10 of the consensus list, but it's not. I gotta say, it's going to be really fun to engage in the Instagram chat when this all goes live, because there's so much more opinion that could be extolled in the 90s bracket than could be in the 80s. Like you said, like, there are 200 great LPs. Yeah, people are going to yell that we didn't have, 113 on our top 100. But the taste level can go so much further afield that it's going to be interesting to see, like, the people that do fuck with the pod, where they choose to fight battles with us about stuff. Anyway, I just love doing this stuff. I love nerding out on hardcore. It's the best thing ever. Hardcore rules.
Yeah, and anyone that thinks I have too much sway on this stuff, Funeral Oration comes in at 104. So it didn't make the list. And we're doing the 70s next, people. Pops, final thoughts on this?
I think it's a great list. I think it's very representational of what was happening. I would be remiss if I didn't say that there was a lot of women, LGBTQ plus, that didn't make the list, and that's not because those bands weren't important. It just wasn't a consensus of 100 spots. But I think what was very cool about the 90s is that, sure, you're always going to miss what you didn't experience, but when you zoom out and look at what you did experience, I don't know, I think a lot of my exposure to different lifestyles, different ways of thinking was in that very formative time. And that's really important to me. So if those things didn't make the list, that's okay, because I kind of carry that with me. And I think if you look at go through 90s flyers and see the types of bands that were playing together and the ideas that were commingling. And I think that's really special. And it's not me saying it was better. I think it is very special to have that period of time where you were exposed to things that made you a little uncomfortable and opened your eyes and made you coexist with people that weren't your background. And I think that's the part of the list that isn't represented, not in a bad way. It's just, a list is a finite thing, right? But all the experience around it, being around there, it's kind of like who I am today. And I don't know, it's very cool to be able to work on something like this and have a conversation with everyone and put it out there. And now the discourse will begin, and that's great.
I
love that. And that's why we did it, right? Like, the same thing, Puss did the one for the 80s. We wanted to put ours out there. And that's what's important, is people put your list out there. You want your list to live forever, or at least until I stop paying the Squarespace money. Send me your list on a single page, and I will put it on our website. You know what I'm saying? Dan, where were you trying to get in?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Anthony's saying. it's interesting that our 90s list has, it touches on certain things, but there are so many shows where, like, the Peaches were playing with, excessive force or something, just
exactly.
So much stuff was happening on a DIY basis in the 90s where, I mean, you think of the 80s, there was big money, big shows on both coasts, and then it just kind of ran out. Like it wasn't there anymore for promoters to do big things. So it went to a very DIY basis, and the sharing of the punk spaces and putting together multiple genres that would never happen in 2022 at a show was so fucking rad. And it's hard to reflect that through the list, but they're on there. Like the variation and, things like, I put on the Crudos Spit Boy split because, it was important to get Spit Boy on there as well. It didn't quite make the list because the other Crudos record was ranked higher, but it goes to say, like, there was a lot more pushing of politics and personal politics and sexual politics that were happening within our scene that were challenging a lot of people that were coming from the suburbs. And I think it was fantastic. And I just wanted to echo that point that Pops was talking about, because there really were some very varied bills in this decade. And I think that was for the entire betterment of punk and hardcore.
Yeah, I want to say one thing real quick, that something that made a huge impression on me was, being someone who I might drive an hour to a show, right? And then the things I take home, I grab a bunch of zines or whatever. And it was kind of an awesome time because there was a lot of free things that you could pick up, right? Just literature, whatever. Literature, I'm going to use that loosely, but,
paper.
Ephemera, right? You could pick up all this ephemera. And then you're on your ride home and you're reading things, like, it's a very finite space, and you're reading things that are like a little out of your comfort zone. And it might not resonate. It might not be anything, but I think having that space to go somewhere and exchange ideas and at least be exposed to them, I'm very fortunate to come from that. Like, I really think, that the 70s, 80s, you're not going to touch it, right? Like, it's absolutely incredible and diverse and amazing. But I don't want to discount the 90s of people kind of taking ownership of that audience and doing something with it, because I think a lot of people who are very progressive in that zone are still progressive today, and I think that's very important. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, I want to mention the Los Crudos. They got brought up. That's another interesting one because 3 people voted for them, and it was 3 different records. So, like, the same shine that we were given Shelter for having, like, such a catalog where people ride for different parts of it. We should say that for them. And they were also, like, pretty solidly ranked, 23, 57, and 59 for the Crudos stuff. And I think the only person that didn't vote for him was Ben because he's a racist. Okay. And then just playing. We're just fucking around. That's because, Ben, you called me out on something on some pod. Like, you put me
it was the 80s one. He said you were transphobic because you erased his pick of that song being about the replacement song being about trans lives.
Yeah, I was trying to be vague so I wouldn't get it again. Thanks, Dan. Fucking asshole.
And I didn't say you were transphobic. I merely insinuated it.
It's true. You just insinuated it totally. Anyone with half a brain could figure out what you're getting at. Myself included, has about 70% of a brain. I want to say, like, the 90s, like, my lasting impression of it is, like, I love it. It's when I get into punk and hardcore, and there's such a big tent, and I ride for, like, both sides of it, right? Like, I love the big, beautiful beast that is hardcore, and that's because I love, like, the tough guy knucklehead stuff, And I love the ultra PC stuff, right? Where like they don't get it all the way. And I just don't think that like this thing would be the same without both sides of it. You know, it's like, and I don't know if I would have this outlook if I didn't get into hardcore in the 90s, right? To have an appreciation for both sides of it, to like, you know, like a lot of like the 90s tough guy stuff, and then also like go to shows all the time in the pickle patch, right? Like that's what made me personally who I am. You know what I'm saying? And like having to do a lot of the DIY stuff because at the time that I'm getting into this stuff, like, you know, there's nowhere to do shows, right? So we're trying to like carve things out ourselves for hardcore in our local area. So the 90s are just special, and I think that it's a very personal decade, you know? Like everyone has their different lanes and they're all very personal, and that's kind of what we grab onto. So wild decade. Not as consensus as the 70s or the 80s, but it is what it is. We did our best on this list. I think we can all agree that the majority of it is pretty good, at least the four of us. And yeah, we welcome your lists, people. So get them on one page, send them in to 185 miles south at gmail.com. I will post them on the website. And I'm really interested to see what you guys think. And last time around for the 80s, I mean, this isn't going to matter because if you're listening this deep in the pod, you know what's up. But like last time, like we post the 1 through 20, and then everyone's like, "Well, what about this? And what about this?" It's like, dude, it's just a 1 through 20 out of 100. Come on, listen to the podcast and look at the whole list, right? So, Dan, that was wild, huh?
It was insane that they were even in your text of describing, hey, this is only the 1 through 20. Please go to the website and look at everyone's list and also look at the top 100. People didn't do that. They didn't read the comment at all. They just go, where the fuck is this?
Where's this? It's like, dude, that's number 21, dog.
Yeah.
Settle down.
Chill.
Settle down.
You got to chill.
You got to chill, dog. You know what's up? All right. Everyone, the 90s ruled. Check it out. This is all to talk. I want to see your lists. I love this shit. All we want to do is talk hardcore. Keep it positive. Daniel, where can the people find you?
You can yell at me at Southpaw Instagrammer on Instagram.
All right, Ben, where can people find you?
You can throw trash at me on Instagram as well, at Cold Chillin' Book.
Pops, where can the people find you?
If you can spell it, AnthonyPapalardo.com. That'll get you towards all my things.
Yeah, man. And for me, the best way, 185 miles south at gmail.com. I respond to everyone. You can also go to 185 miles south on Twitter and Instagram. And I will do my best to get back to you, but the DMs are weird, so maybe not. Hit me up on that Gmail. Personally, Zack Retaliate on Instagram. And you know, Retaliate is the best on Instagram. Everyone, we love you all. We'll talk to you again next Monday.